Hello and welcome to Books and Beyond. I'm your host, Jimmy Bennett. Books and Beyond is the show where we help people personify their aspirations. I'm an author myself. My latest book is A Castle Christmas. Um, I'm very proud of it. It's a good book. I'm actually working on a screenplay at the time. I'll let you know how that comes out. Should be kind of fun. Um, Also, I'd like to mention I am a member of the Southeastern Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association. It's a group of writers, publishers, editors, anybody who has anything to do with the written word. It's a great organization if you want to write or want to learn more about it or want to find out who you could illustrate for or edit for or something. It's we meet virtually now because of COVID. Hopefully, we'll get back into in-person meetings soon. It's the third Monday of every month, about 6:30. And if you go to the Southeastern Connecticut authors page on Facebook, the SECAPA page, there's usually a link and a time. So please join us. We're always looking for more input. It's a great way to network and meet people. So anyways, let's move on. And I would like to introduce my guest this week, Sharon Dukett. Hi, Sharon. How you doing?
Good, good.
Good.
Thank you
Good.
for having me here today.
Oh no, I'm more than happy. Sharon has written a memoir called No Rules, but I'm going to let her tell us about it.
Okay, so my memoir, No Rules, takes place in the early 1970s. It's about when I was 16 years old and I ran away from home to join the hippies in 1971 and what transpired for the next 4 years after that, how that changed my life and led me to discover my own strength and become awakened to feminism.
Wow. Now, I mean, I don't want to pry or whatever, but did you run away just for the adventure of it, or did you run away from it because you didn't like your home life, or you?
It was really that I felt that my parents were forcing me into down a road that I didn't want to go, where my future was going to be live at home, become a secretary. They didn't see the point of girls going to college back then because they said girls just go to college to meet husbands and you can do that anywhere. So they felt that I was going to, that was going to be my life. Wait till you get married, have children, and be a secretary. So not that there's anything wrong with being a secretary, but there weren't any other options. I think nurse and teacher were the two other jobs that women could have as careers. So basically, and my parents also didn't feel that it was appropriate to have a career and have a family. You chose. So I just didn't want to live that life. To me, it just felt so confining. I looked at my parents. They didn't seem to be happy with their lives. And I just felt that I needed to break away, and I didn't see any point in continuing doing what I was doing since I didn't want that future.
Right. I think now it's hard for us to describe it, I think, to the younger generations, the divide in the country, the schism between the hippies and the establishment,
Yeah.
as it were. Those lines are very much blurred so much now. I mean, there's still a lot of movements that being woke and the BLM movement and stuff like that a lot of people probably, that divides this country.
Yeah.
But not in such a I don't want to say flamboyant, but such a huge contrast. I grew up in a military family.
Yeah.
So hippies to us were like from the moon. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? That was just, But of course, as a kid, it was, hey man, that was the groovy way to live. I mean, that's what we wanted. We wanted to rebel against our parents. We wanted to, but of course, not being a woman, I mean, society was a lot easier for a male at that time,
Yeah.
To do what you want and be what you wanted to be.
Well, except you had to face the draft and go
Yes,
into
well,
Vietnam.
that's true too. Yeah, I was a little too young for the draft, so I was just in that in between age,
Right.
Young teens in
Right.
the early '70s. And it's fascinating to me to the fact that, I can't I just don't see a millennial or Gen X kid nowadays taking off his headset, shutting off his PlayStation or his Xbox, grabbing his knapsack and heading out the door and heading across the country to join somewhere else. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's just a different
Yeah, well, you can do that virtually.
time.
You don't have to actually go anywhere. Out of
Well,
your chair.
that's the other thing. I laugh because I'm thinking, if my kid ran away, I think, well, he's going to get as far as till his phone runs out of charge, and then he'll be back to charge his phone. So I mean, you're never really disconnected.
Yeah.
So how was? God, it's incredible to me at 16. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, my older sister went with me. Full disclosure.
Oh. Okay.
She was 21, and you would think that maybe I was going with her, but it was me. It was my idea, and I talked her into it. So, but it was great that she went. So that really helped. We convinced my ex-boyfriend to drive us because neither one of us had driver's licenses, and we got in a car and went to California, went to Los Angeles. It was in January. It snowed most of the way across country. And then when we arrived, it was we basically he didn't want to stay there, which turned out to be good for us actually. And he left with the car, and we stayed there, and we moved to Venice Beach.
Wow.
Which we had never heard of at the time, but people told us, well, that's where the hippies live. Go to Venice Beach.
Yeah.
And to this day, people are aware Venice Beach is a real alternative kind of cultural
Right.
environment, and so that's where we spent our next several months. And a lot of my book talks about many of the things and the people that we met there and what evolved.
Wow.
While I lived there. So, and then from there, we go on to other, she and I kind of went and did separate things, and I went back to Boston and up to Canada, eventually went home, and, there was a lot of experiences along the way. And then the following year, went back on the road and hitchhiked across Canada with my then boyfriend, and that was a real adventure. And then ended up living on a commune after I graduated from high school for a while. And that was a really deeply learning experience because a lot of, it was an off-the-grid commune. So we didn't have electricity, we didn't have plumbing, we had an outhouse, we had gas lights, we had wood stoves. And,
Wow.
And we built yurts that we lived in, and we had a log cabin that was our community house. And I learned to do everything from chop wood to build, fires in the fireplace, and a lot of people made crafts within that community. And it was an interesting experience. And one of the things I like to tell people who say, well, what was it like to live on a commune? And I say, think about how difficult it can sometimes be to live with one person that you truly love. And then try to imagine living with a bunch of people, some of whom you don't even like.
Yeah.
And that's some of what living on a commune is all about. Even though we all, there were times that it was a great experience. There were times when it wasn't. But I learned so much from being around all these people. And one of the things that, as you mentioned about being in a Navy family, I mean, there were a fair amount of Vietnam veterans that were mingling within the groups of hippies, people who had come back. There were, in Canada, I ran into draft dodgers and even a person, who had just left the Army and gone AWOL. So the environment at that time, the kind of people that you met and mixed with was so varied. You met people from all different walks of life, from all different economic backgrounds. And so it was less like today amongst the people you tend to stay within your sort of social economic background groups, and that wasn't the case then. And as a result of that, we had all kinds of experience that came with the people that we met. In fact, one of the people in the commune had been an Army brat all of his life, went to Cornell, and ended up on this commune. So,
Did you embrace the hippie mentality? I mean, did you really anti-establishment type of?
yes. Yes, I was. Yeah, very much so. In fact, that was, I think that was the reason why the commune drew me in, because I really wanted to live a different way. And I think even though I'm no longer, even though I live pretty traditionally nowadays, a lot of what I learned from that experience still stays with me in terms of one of the things that was beginning at that time was caring about the planet, the environment. We were sort of making a minimal footprint by doing that, and getting away from materialism and those sorts of things. So, and organic food. I mean, that was kind of when it was really starting to pick up, by all of us growing our own food and shopping at co-ops and places where you couldn't buy alternative kinds of foods.
Right.
That became more and more popular, and more and more commercially successful. That was the beginning, I think, with a lot of the people who were doing that.
I was talking to a friend of mine about that not too long ago. We were talking that in the 70s, we were very much the environment.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's hard for me. I try to describe to my kids some days what the roads used to look like with the litter on it.
Yeah.
I mean, they would be appalled, or they just. I don't think that they can really see it in their heads.
Yeah.
How bad it was.
Yes.
And then, we did do much better cleaning that up, but we haven't done much better with taking care of the planet.
Right.
And it's sad, but all that stuff that they talked about in the 70s, global warming, environmental changes, running out of resources, all that stuff, we're seeing it now.
Right.
And it's happening. It's true.
It is.
And that's, I hope that if anything, people nowadays will start taking that a little more to, take it a little bit more serious.
Absolutely.
Because, we can attest that, yes, it has changed. It's changed a lot since we were young.
Yeah.
And it's
And
going to get worse
There
before it gets better.
there are some improvements. For example, when I went to Venice Beach the first time, we found a place to live actually right near the beach, $95 a month, and a block to the beach. And when that happened, we were there for probably a week, and one day there was there was a storm or something. It was windy, and I came outside, and I looked around and I said, "Oh my God, there's mountains." I had never seen them. All I had seen was sort of this beach that went off into smog.
Yeah.
And that was the first day that I saw that at the end of the beach and way out there, that the whole Los Angeles basin was surrounded by mountains.
Yeah.
And it was such an amazing sight. And then, but you see that more now.
Yes.
It's not smogged in all the time.
Right.
Because California has really been very diligent about addressing, air quality and that kind of thing. So it's improved there, but it's unfortunately hasn't in a lot of other places. So
Yeah, I'm hoping that people will understand the changes, that we've seen.
right,
And I'm sure it was the same with our grandparents and their grandparents before them. Things change.
Right.
Happen. But it's been kind of a bad spiral. Now, did you ever heavily get involved in the anti-Vietnam War movement?
I mean, a little bit in that, we all headed north to go protest in San Francisco. I think it might have been one of the last moratoriums they had, I'm not sure. It was the one where they had a big demonstration in San Francisco, and they also had a big demonstration in Washington. And in Washington, they ended up arresting hundreds of people, maybe even more. I can't remember exactly how many, like thousands. They put them in a fenced-in area and stuff like that. Didn't happen in San Francisco. We actually never got to the demonstration for reasons that I explain in the book, but it was something that was very important to me and to everyone. And there were other organizations that I participated in and so forth. So I don't really talk a lot about that in the book, although I do talk about some of the people that I met who had come back from Vietnam. Right. There was somebody who lived in our building that I came to know fairly well. And he would talk about his experiences all the time. And it was kind of shocking.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
So what kind of, when you wrote this, autobiographical, pretty much, right? Memoir.
Memoir, yeah.
What made you want to write about that period in your life?
Well, there was a couple of reasons. First of all, I wanted to write about how becoming aware of my own strength and awakening to feminism and what it was like in the early days of feminism. It's known as second wave feminism. And what it was like for women at that time for things to kind of be the way they were when I was 16, and what started changing over that time, because that was when the women's liberation movement kind of exploded in the early 70s, and what we all started to see going on and so forth. There's a scene where I'm at the Ithaca Women's Center and there was a lot of people from Cornell there, a lot of women. We would meet at these potluck dinners, and they were all talking about how they were going to change the world by becoming radical feminist lawyers. And it was actually the same year that Hillary Clinton graduated from Yale. And the idea was to become a lawyer so that you could essentially change the laws, eventually go into Congress and so forth and actually affect the laws to protect women and to encourage equality and that kind of thing. So it was happening right in front of our eyes. And then things did begin changing, and starting with ourselves. And so that was one of the reasons. The other reason I think I wanted to write about that period of time because it started going away. I really began it like in the early '80s and into the '90s. That period of time was disappearing, and all the things that were part of that. And I wanted to preserve a lot of the history, the people, what the times were like. And a lot of people have said that that's one of the strongest parts of my book, is how it really puts you in a time and place. And I think that era is either glamorized or trivialized a lot. And in any case, or seen as silly, that kind of thing. And so I wanted to really give people some insight into what it was really like to live at that time and to have those experiences and go through all of that. So,
how do you feel nowadays? How do you feel the movement has come?
Well,
obviously we're not
100%
there.
Yeah, we've made tons of progress. We're in a situation lately where it feels like, there's a backlash going on, and it's a little frightening about, the potential for losing a lot of the rights that have been gained in the past. So, we're dealing with some of those things. But there are some things that are just never going to change. The idea of women staying at home and not working, that's not going to happen. We're not going to go back to that. There's probably a lot of young women who probably feel like, geez, I wish I could stay home and not work.
Yeah.
But they don't realize that, what that often meant was it wasn't like now, where if you stayed home and didn't work, you had, this sort of nice life where you had your own car and you had, it typically meant that, your husband took the car to work and you were stuck in the house.
Right.
and you know, there was 3 TV shows on and maybe a couple of soaps that you would watch, and that was your life.
Yeah.
You know, no internet and contact with the neighbors maybe, and you did what your husband told you to do, and you were given so much money to live on. So it wasn't all that glamorous that I think young women in today's world might imagine it to be.
Right.
So, plus, you know, there are many women who are stay-at-home mothers, and they know it's not glamorous anyway.
Right.
In fact, my daughter-in-law, who has 3 young children, has lived that life for the last few years, including being a teacher for the last 2 years, you know, because that's what you've been doing during COVID. Yeah, it's a struggle.
Yeah, it is. It is. I would. I know I couldn't do it. You know, I mean, I don't think I could.
Yeah.
So you know, the other thing that struck me was it was almost 50 years ago.
It was. It was. In fact, last 2021 was the 50th anniversary of when I left.
Wow.
So.
How do you remember all this?
Okay. Well, a lot of it is because I did a lot of the writing in the 80s and 90s. So I actually wrote a big chunk of a very first draft that I pretty much trashed. I don't think I used any of it, but it was a way to get all the memories down.
Right.
Once I started learning more about writing and went to a lot of writers' conferences and stuff, I realized I had to rewrite so much, and my rewrite was totally different. But I had all those notes, just printed notes of of all of these things. So that really helped. The other thing that helped when I was writing in the 90s is I would play music from that era that was very evocative of the times, or you know, that I remembered listening to during certain time periods, and that would really help the memories come. And as I was writing, the more I wrote and the more I worked on these memories, the deeper I was able to go, because I mean, we have them all in here. They're there.
Yeah.
It's just a case of whether you can pull them up.
Right.
So you can use different techniques to help pull those memories out and experience them again. So in fact, I was writing about this one, it's a scene that's in the book, in fact, where I remember standing on the side of the road. We were in Hope, British Columbia. And as I was writing about it, I remembered the pickup truck that came and picked us up, and I remember opening the door, and in my mind I could see him turning towards me, and he was wearing a Mickey Mouse t-shirt, which I had forgotten until I was writing that, and it's like, oh wow, yeah, and his name was Mike.
Yep.
So it's funny how those things happen.
Because one of my old chefs used to always say, I've forgotten more than you'll ever know.
Yeah.
And I think about that sometimes because I've always, I grew up in the restaurant business, you know, I mean, I was a chef for 45 years. And,
Okay.
You know, and so many things happened.
Yeah.
So many different experiences and stuff. And I think to myself, I always wanted to write the great, you know, life in the retail food business, you know.
Right, yeah.
And I'm surprised at how little, how much I don't remember, like a vague, you know, I mean, years, well, you know, I'm sure a lot of that was drinking and drugs, but you know, years went by, I don't really remember any particular incidents about it and stuff like that, but you can still pick people out. But I've met thousands and thousands of people.
Right.
And that's one thing, and I do always encourage people, is to write journals.
Yeah.
Keep a journal. You know, it doesn't matter, even if you're not a writer or whatever, you keep a journal. Yeah. You keep those notes, you keep those things so people, you know, people are interested, you know, people are interested in, or not even just, I would like my kids one day to pick up the books and go, even if it's just mundane things. Right. You know, things are gone that we used to do all the time and stuff like that. We have a few minutes left. Do you want to read a short passage out of your book?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yep.
And I don't know if we have time to talk about my next book, but
well, yeah, we can do either or both, or.
Well, I'll just read the passage, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, so this takes place, Chapter 1, January 1971, in South Windsor, Connecticut. I slipped the floor-length dress I'd sewn from a purple Indian print bedspread over my head and pulled it down to cover the 2 pairs of long pants, 3 sweaters, and 4 pairs of underwear I'd put on moments before, then realized how huge my waist looked. If I didn't wear my coat to cover all these clothes, my mother would realize something was wrong. I yanked my dress sleeves over all my other sleeves. If anything showed, I'd be screwed. While stuffing a pair of jeans and my fake suede jacket with a peace sign on the shoulder into a paper bag, I scanned the closet for my sandals. I'd need sandals in Southern California. I was certain it would be hot there, even in January. With my meager belongings stashed for my journey, I took a last brief look at my room, the room in which I'd spent 12 of my 16 years living in, and wondered how I could abandon all of my things. The FM radio that my parents had given me for Christmas 3 weeks earlier, the guitar I had begged for when I was 12, my notebooks full of poetry I'd written over the past 4 years. Above my twin-size bed was a poster I'd made with magic markers the previous spring, flowers and peace signs forming a border around large decorative letters that read, "War is not healthy for children," and other living things. Don't get hung up on it, I coached myself. It's only stuff.
Wow. See, that's just beautiful. Now, you are working on another book.
I am. It's a thriller this time.
Oh.
Rather than a memoir. And it is about climate, corruption, and betrayal, and one woman's struggle to find and free her husband who has disappeared after protesting and being arrested on the steps of the Capitol in Washington.
Oh, wow. Well, that sounds interesting. Good.
Yeah.
And I won't press you for it too much, but how long do you think that'll be?
Well, I'm finishing, I've gone through 2 drafts, and I'm working with an editor now on my final revisions. I'm hoping to have it done by the beginning of June, and then I'll be looking for an agent.
Well, we'll look forward to that then.
Yeah, yeah.
And you have a few events coming up, or an event coming up soon, right?
I do. I'm going to be signing books at Bank Square Books in Mystic on April 3rd, Sunday, from 1 to 3 p.m.
Good. Good. That should be fun.
Yes.
It's nice. Downtown Mystic's nice. I've done one there.
Yeah.
It's good. You
Yeah.
know? So
Hopefully it'll be nice
Sharon,
weather.
thank you so much. I mean, I think your story is just fascinating. I can't wait to read your book. I think everybody should, young and old, should read it. Especially even the younger millennials, Generation X people should read it just to see just how things were and how much it was, how many things have changed.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming today. And
Thank you for having me.
no, it was my pleasure. So that was Books and Beyond this time. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Take care.